Hey, Hawkeye fans. Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, along with Tyler Tachman of the Des Moines Register. We are live, our usual Tuesday podcast. Normally we go at 4:30. Today, Tyler was kind enough to push this up to 4 o'clock because I got to get out of here at 4:25. So this will be a quicker pod than normal by about 5 minutes. So let's get right to it. So we're cutting our usual topics from 3 to 2, but they're two meaty topics. So first, Tyler, let's start off with today obviously was press conference day in Iowa City. Much anticipated, I think, in some ways, just to see kind of the mood of the team, what Kirk Ferentz had to say, what Cade McNamara had to say after the 31-0 loss to Penn State had processed. Certainly a lot of angst about the offense, understandably. I wrote about that extensively. We'll get to that in segment 2. But first off, why don't you welcome and give us a little recap of kind of what you felt like you heard today from the Iowa camp.
First, I'll say I had to really move around my plans of not doing anything the rest of the day to fit this in. So, no, I think obviously there's a lot of frustration on the outside, and I think that Iowa is aware of that. But pretty much, if I had to kind of take down exactly what was said today, it was basically that the season isn't over. It's one loss, and they can't let, I think Nick Jackson put it really well, that they can't let last week's loss lead to a loss this week. I don't think anyone on Iowa is basically saying because they lost to Penn State, the season's over. Like, no one is by any stretch of the imagination waving the white flag. I think that there's a sense that things do need to get better, and especially around the offense, there needs to be improvement because what was done against Penn State, frankly, wasn't acceptable if Iowa wants to get, where it wants to be. But at the same time, Iowa's still 3-1. There's still a lot of opportunities left. There's still time left. So I don't think, as much as kind of the alarm bells feel like they're sounding, there's still a lot of season left to play.
That was certainly, the message from players. Sounded like Cade McNamara delivered a fiery speech or impactful speech maybe after the game. Be a better way to put it. Leadership seems like it's in a good place. The question is, and which I kind of raised in my post-game column, and it was after our post-game podcast, so I wrote that after that. I needed that 2-hour rainy drive, from State College to Harrisburg to kind of formulate my thoughts. But man, that was a miserable drive, by the way. So much rain in Pennsylvania. Come on, like even getting on the plane, like the water was coming into the jet bridge.
No, I don't think. I mean, it was fitting that we basically didn't see sun the entire time there.
Yeah.
It was like basically rain and wind. So
yeah. The 60 hours, 62 hours, I measured it from when I woke up to when I got home and saw no points. So anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, the column was just sort of like, this program has really not been good, really, since the 2021 win against Penn State. I mean, 15-10 record. That's fine. That's decent. That's about maybe a slightly below average for Ferentz standards, but the losses have been so bad, 225 to 54 combined margin in 7 of those losses, 0-5 to ranked teams. You think about 42-3 to Michigan, 54-10 to Ohio State, 31-0 to Penn State. It doesn't get much more lopsided than that in terms of the East Division powers. And then you lose to Purdue and Wisconsin in 21. You lose to Iowa State at home last year. You lose to Nebraska at home last year. So it just doesn't feel good. And that's why it feels different about, I don't know, just sort of this week. It's like, okay, you're saying the right things, but we've got 2 years of evidence. And that's kind of where this week is so important, right, Tyler? I mean, at least you got to see that this team has a lot of fight into it. This team has a little bit of offense to it. And it's not. It doesn't make a statement, but you got to see something this week. And I feel like the players, Nico Ragaini said that. He's like, basically, we're going to find out what kind of team we are after that butt kicking. We're going to find out this week. And we'll know after Saturday what kind of team we are. So I think that's where this week is framed for me, is there's a lot pinned on this Saturday to bounce back.
I think the thing about the Penn State game was that the odds were already against Iowa. No Jazz Patterson, no Caleb Johnson, no Luke Lachey. You're going into a really difficult atmosphere in the whiteout. But I think there was, the it seemed like the odds of Iowa winning were pretty slim. But I think there was an expectation that Iowa would at least go in and compete and at least make it a game, and that was obviously not the case. It was pretty clear that Penn State was head and shoulders above where Iowa was. And I think that, not just that Iowa lost, but the way in which it happened, putting up 0 points, I think that, along with frustration from last season, kind of is what compounded, and heightened the frustration, I would say. But I thought it was notable that right after the game, Cade McNamara said basically that this performance didn't exemplify the offense we are, the defense we are, the special teams we are. And right now, I mean, those were strong words. Right now, the only evidence we have against a Big Ten team is what happened against Penn State. So maybe what he says turns out to be true. We kind of have to get more evidence on that. I feel like actions speak louder than words. So what we see on the field is kind of a better representation of what we're hearing. And it kind of reminded me of actually when Iowa beat Indiana to open the 2021 season. And I know the parallels between Iowa and Indiana football, there's obvious discrepancies. But after Indiana lost that game, one of their players was like, I know this Indiana team is like, this is a good football team. We believe this is a good team. They went on and won 2 more games the rest of the season. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to read into too much what he says. I think it was notable that he still has belief in the team, but I think we need to see it happen on the field more so than hear about it.
I'm glad you brought that up because we talked about that on the drive too, and that is important perspective. That's a really good perspective. Indiana went 2-10 that year. They were preseason number 17, something like that, right? And Iowa took it to them, and they didn't really bounce back ever. So yeah, we'll see what happens with this Iowa team. Cade McNamara, here's one direct quote from him today. He said, "The season's not over yet. We're continually evaluating every single week. This isn't even close to the finished product." So again, take it for what it's worth. Kirk Ferentz is, I guess we'll get to more of what Kirk said in a little bit, but one of his answers regarding the offense, I don't know, I'm kind of spilling into our second segment a little bit here, but was basically, the excuse that McNamara missed so much time, and that if he had had those 8 or 9 weeks of spring ball and not having the quad injury, I mean, that would have helped a lot, but they didn't. So, I mean, that's football, as he says, right? I mean, that's so, but that's kind of how he's explaining it away a little bit, the struggles. He thinks it's going to be better too. A lot to get into. I know I'm getting into the offense right now, but anything else today? I guess let's hit a few little other bullet points. No Caleb Johnson this week. No Jazzy Patterson this week. Cade McNamara did say he is closer to 100%, so that's good. He goes, I'm getting a lot closer to being able to run 100%. I think all my pocket movement is at 100%. It's just more of when I open it up, like on that 18-yard scramble, which was Iowa's second longest play of the day on Saturday. Before we get to wide receivers and offense, because I know that's the meat of this conversation, anything else you learned today from Hawkeye players, from Kirk Ferentz that stood out, other than his artificial intelligence comments, which were actually quite amusing? We are going to get Phil Parker tomorrow, just so our listeners and viewers know. So we'll have a little bit more, I guess, recap off of the defense maybe on tomorrow night's radio show. So anything more you heard today, Tyler, that stands out?
No, I think that, among the things that Iowa needs to deal with and I guess just be cognizant of is they can't let the external toxicity and negativity get within the team, because of the way that we live now as a society. It's so easy, it's so accessible for guys to see things on social media, and this isn't like to paint like a picture of like a woe is them, woe is me type thing, but it's out there and it's a variable that you have to take into account, that you can't let that negativity seep into the team. It feels like Iowa has not let that happen at all, and their outlook and attitude is very positive. Despite Saturday, that they know they still have a lot of season ahead of them, but I think part of the dynamic of the world now is not letting those outside factors kind of get inside the team. On top of that, I feel like we need to see a pretty demonstrative statement against Michigan State. This is a Michigan State team that isn't very good. Coming off the loss to Penn State, I just feel like Iowa kind of needs to take out all of that frustration against Michigan State, win by 20 or more. To me, maybe 17 or more, I say. But it feels like this. If Iowa barely squeaks by, it feels like the ship continues to kind of sink. If they're able to put together a good performance, it doesn't by any stretch solve all their problems or get even close to that, but it does feel like they're able to kind of get the ship going in the right direction.
Yeah, and you guys all know I'm a Bears fan, and so it's like, so the Bears absolutely lost by exactly 31 points with no offense to a really good team, Kansas City, the other day. So my life is filled with terrible offense. But what I will say is, some Bears fans I'm listening to say the same thing. Like, oh, this is, they're playing Denver this week, who just gave up 70 points, right? Well, on the flip side, Tyler, Michigan State's looking at Iowa like, hey, here's our chance to bounce back now. This team sucks on offense. And same with Denver against the Bears. Like, this is their chance too. Like, it may look like an easier part of the schedule, but they're looking at you like that's the easier part of the schedule. So it's no guarantee Iowa's going to win this week at all. Open as a 6.5 point favorite. It's mushroomed to 11.5. So certainly public sentiment thinks Iowa's going to bounce back, but Vegas's early line was 6.5. So it's not like this is a sure thing. So let's get into topic 2, which is the offense. Tough questions for Kirk Ferentz. I see someone wants to give me an apology for something. I don't even know what that's for. He said, South Bend Hawkeye says, I owe Chad L an apology for going after him about not asking hard questions on the last pod you guys did. Chad, I apologize. Apology accepted. I didn't take offense to it. I understand that's part of the territory. Thank you for listening to us. Let's talk about receiver targets, because that ended up, I wrote about it this morning, and all of a sudden that was the theme of the press conference. I'm not saying everyone read that and started asking. I think it was just an obvious topic, right? 14 wide receiver catches through 4 games, Tyler. There are, I'll have to call my article, I believe 173 FBS receivers individually with more than 14 receptions this year. This is the whole wide receiver core for the Hawkeyes. I don't want to get into every detail of my article because I really want you guys to read it. It was pretty thorough statistical analysis, and I did get some help with it from the outside. 37% of Iowa's passes are targeted to wide receivers. That is the lowest in the nation, with the next lowest being 54% by Navy, a service academy team that I think still runs the triple option, and San Diego State, which is known for bad offense. So, and that's way below them. And it's way below even last year for Iowa. So the questions today was, how do you, with Luke Lachey out, you have to get the wide receivers involved. How in 2023 are you not even making it a priority to throw to these guys? And I thought maybe the most telling quote of all was from Caden McNamara, because Scott Tachman asked him about it, the receivers. And he basically said, he's running the play. What does he say? I'm just a quarterback. I'm not calling the plays or any of that. That's not my decision. I'm just going to run the play as fit, and I'm going to throw it to the open guy. So that's what Brian Ferentz is calling. I'm throwing to who he tells me to throw to, basically, which are the tight ends. And that doesn't make any sense in 2023. It really doesn't.
And I think it's unfortunate because Seth Anderson has shown kind of so many in a limited time period. He's shown so many flashes of what he can do, and I think it's unfortunate that he hasn't been able to get the ball in his hands more. That a healthy Deontay Vines hasn't been able to get his hands in the ball, his the ball in his hands more, or Nico Raghini, or there really hasn't been much opportunity for Caleb Brown to even show what he can do. I think Kirk Ferentz said today, he said, and I want to dive into this a little bit. He said the only stat that matters is winning, right? So I think, look, if Iowa wins and the receivers aren't getting a lot of looks, then look, I think you live with it, because if I was winning, that's the number one most important thing. But if your number one goal is to win and that doesn't happen, and you look at the receivers' output and what the chances that they're given, then I think you might need to rethink that as, hey, we need to start getting the ball into those guys' hands more. We need to find, ways to get playmakers in space. And I also look at it from the sense of, how do you even try to recruit wide receivers moving forward if they're getting so many limited looks? I don't want to speculate on, because obviously it's still early, and I don't want to speculate on anybody leaving, but it's just like, it feels like if I was a wide receiver, it would be hard to kind of wrap my mind around coming to Iowa, because it's almost like kind of a wide receiver in a triple option type scheme where you're just not getting a lot of looks. And obviously it's different than that, but I think there has to be, in terms of building in the future, there has to be something you can show wide receivers to make Iowa a destination that's appealing. Because otherwise, I just think it kind of cannibalizes itself, right? If you're not getting the ball to wide receivers don't want to come to Iowa, and then you're left with the depleted wide receiver pool because you didn't throw to them, and now you have no one to throw to. So it's kind of just like an endless cycle that can kind of cause some issues.
Yeah, and in 2019, Iowa tied a program record for wide receiver catches. They had the 4 top receivers were wide receivers. It was Nico Raghini actually had the most catches, 46. Emir Smith-Marset, 44. Then it was Tyrone Tracy and Brandon Smith. Smith was hurt that year, if you guys recall. So all 4 of those guys had huge contributions to that season. Iowa was 10-3 and ran USC off the field in the Holiday Bowl with wide receivers. So Brian Ferentz has shown he can do that. And I feel like the talent in the receiver room is better than it was a year ago, for sure. Now they do need to upgrade it, and I think NIL helps with that. But you've got guys, they're just choosing not to throw it. And that's why someone in the chat, it already disappeared off my screen, but had asked did you think it was notable that Cade said what he said? Oh, there it is. Brandon Walker said, did you think it was notable that Cade McNamara said he just does what Brian says, essentially, blaming BF? And yeah, I did. He did not. I don't think his intent was to throw Brian under the bus, but I also think he didn't want to say it was his fault, because let's be honest, he didn't have a chance to throw much at Penn State, and he wasn't even out there that much. 4 plays. He was on the field for 4 plays in the second half. That's just wild. And I think the targets are going to the tight ends. You saw in the scripted plays, most of those were going to Eric All. That screen that All tripped on. There was a couple middle screens to the tight ends. The first completion to All was 20 yards. That was a good one. The shovel pass to All. The ball is going to the tight ends. It's designed to go to the tight ends. And my point is, if you're not going to try to throw to the wide receivers, and what about slant? I mean, just anything to get the ball in these playmakers' hands. The best way to increase production is to get big plays. And I'll pull out one other stat for my story and get your reaction, Tyler. And this is incredible. This is maybe the most incredible stat in that whole story. And there are a lot of stats in that story, a ton. So it was objective. It was analytical. It tells a story. And coaches need to reassess what they're doing, because they have 2 passing plays to a wide receiver of more than 30 yards in the last 21 games. 30-plus yards to a wide receiver twice in the last 21 games. 2. One of them, which one it was, because it was the first pass of the season to Seth Anderson, 36 yards when the cornerback fell down. The other one was a 46-yarder from Spencer Petras to Nico Ragaini against Nevada. So neither one of those were even against a Big Ten team. So that's troublesome. That's why you're not moving. That's why you're not getting yardage. That's why you're not getting points. You got to find ways to get the ball to the wide receivers. And it just seems like this offense is not designed to do that or something because obviously you're not even targeting them.
Yeah. One, I think the narrative might have changed a little bit if like there's one pass play that comes to mind against Iowa State where Seth Anderson got a lot of separation. It would have been a really long touchdown pass. Cade McNamara just didn't connect with him. He may have kind of overthrown him a little bit, but I think the narrative changes is like if Iowa hit on that, if maybe there was a couple other times that Iowa would, that one to Nico Ragaini in the Utah State game. I know that probably would have been a tough catch for him, but I think the narrative might be different if Iowa was it felt like they're just a little off. And I don't think that can deter them from trying. I think they need to continue to try that. I think they need to at least put themselves in position to try to do that, because otherwise you just get teams that are going to stack the box against them. And Iowa's offensive line isn't good enough right now to move, if they're outnumbered, to move the box. And I think that the wide receiver question also kind of comes to the fundamental idea of, is Iowa's offensive line good enough? Because are they giving Cade McNamara enough time to survey the field and let guys get down the field and make their routes and cuts and everything? Because against Penn State, the answer was no. There was, I don't fault too much Cade McNamara for what happened to Iowa's offense. I don't really know how much more he could have done. A lot of it kind of felt like it was out of his hands. He just didn't have a lot of time back there. In the first two games of the season, I thought Iowa's offensive line protection was really good. It feels like the last two games it's kind of taken a step back, and I understand that Penn State's defense is good, but you got to at least give your quarterback a chance. You got to at least let him go through his progressions and add on to this the fact that Cade has been dealing with that injury and, probably isn't as mobile as he would like. So all those factors kind of weave together is, maybe I think, and I've said it before, that the offensive line kind of is not all because the lack of wide receiver production isn't based on one thing, but I think the offensive line's, underwhelming performances, especially the last two games, kind of might be a factor in that.
I got to go in a couple minutes here, so a couple final thoughts. Michigan State gave up 536 yards passing to Michael Penix Jr. and Washington. Now, totally different offense.
He's a dog, though.
Yeah, no, I know.
He's the front runner for the Heisman.
But 536 yards passing, 13.7 yards per pass 2 weeks ago. And then they lost 31-9 at home to Maryland. So this is a good chance for Iowa to get their receivers involved. It's sort of like, I view it as sort of like when, and you weren't here for this in 2018, when the Noah Fant conversation mushroomed, where he was off the field and not getting the ball when you had an obvious first-round NFL tight end. And the week after this all happened, Iowa had Noah Fant on the field for 24 of the first 25 plays at Illinois, and they won 63-0. So Iowa did make a correction that week after hearing the outside noise. I'm not saying that this outside noise will reverberate the same, but you've got to – I expect to see a commitment to getting more targets to your playmakers, your guys who have ability to make plays. Caleb Brown, no catches this year. Seth Anderson, 4 catches, right? 4 catches this year. Deontay Vines, 4 catches for like 28 yards this year. Nico has 6. Those are your 14. That's it. It's just crazy. And so you got to get it done. That's the only way you're going to move this offense, is if you get your receivers involved. And it's just not going to work with Steve Stylianos and Addison Estrangla and Eric All. That's just not going to work. You've got to get, if you want to move this team, you've got to get the ball to your receivers. And, part of that's on McNamara too, but I think it's a scheme thing, and I got to go. So I'll give you the last word.
No, I don't think, this isn't a knock on Eric All and the other tight ends. I think they've done a good job. They're capable pieces. I think that just Iowa needs to be more selective of when they use what. I look at the way that teams were able to use like Jimmy Graham, Rob Gronkowski in the red zone and really use them as weapons to punch the ball in the end zone. And I feel like that's where Eric All and Steve Stylianos and Addison Estrella can be really effective. I just think Iowa needs to spread the wealth a little bit more in terms of getting it to the wide receivers, getting the guys that can make plays in space. Just it doesn't have to be, it can be simple stuff. But part of it's felt like Iowa's lacked is just that dynamic element, and part of it is because they just haven't even put themselves in position to have that dynamic element because they haven't gotten those guys the ball. So I think you at the very least have to give them a chance.
Yeah, you got to try. That's my point. You got to try, and they're not trying. So we'll see if they try this week against Michigan State. Try to get to the receivers. I mean, not try to win. But anyway, I got to run. Thank you for the abbreviated for joining us for this abbreviated edition. We always have our Hawk Central radio show on Wednesday nights, KXNO, 6 to 7 p.m. Podcast available, so check that out. And of course, Tyler and I will be back with our post-game episode again late at night on Saturday after Iowa throws for 400 yards and beats Michigan State, right? Anyway, for Tyler Tachman, this is Chad Leistikow saying thank you for joining us, and talk to you soon.